Welcome back to another episode of STEM in Stilettos, where we walk boldly into the world being our authentic, scientific, techie selves. This is your host, Zofia Morales, and today I will be talking with Mary Williams, and I'm going to introduce her to you shortly. Before I do that, I would like to invite you to get to know your own self a little bit better because later on in the show, we are going to be looking at Mary's results when she took the leadership pitfall quiz and discussing some of what that has meant for her personally, ways that she's dealt with some of the downsides of her personal strategy of leading, and perhaps even how that has evolved over the years. And it's super helpful to have your own results with you as we're having these conversations to allow you to have that mirror, that peek into your own personal style as we're having this conversation. And you can go, oh, perhaps there are some things to think about here. So you could find that quiz, grab your pen, grab your piece of paper. You're going to want it anyway because she's got some amazing stuff to share today. And you can go to leadershippitfallquiz.com. That's leadershippitfallquiz.com. It takes 2 minutes. If you don't want to miss anything, you can wait until the commercial break, and it fits perfectly into that commercial break. And you will have that information so you can play along when we have this discussion with our guest today. Speaking of whom, Mary Williams is a catalyst for radical transformation. She's also the founder of Sensible Woo, where intuition meets systems for magical business outcomes. A former digital archivist for a major animation studio, Mary now helps solopreneurs and small business owners with intuitive advising and pre-production strategies for podcasts, YouTube, and newsletters. Known for her sharp insights and playful personality, Mary has been creating online content since 2010, navigating the wild, weird world of entrepreneurship with wit, wisdom, and a little bit of woo. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited we get to chat. We had a meeting before we decided to record together and we just couldn't stop talking. It was awesome.
And I have a feeling we will have that same challenge today. And if you would like to connect further with the guest, just check out the notes in the show liners. There's all kinds of ways you can hook up with her, with me. And at some point, I'm going to start creating like bonus material that will be available to members, but I'm still working on that. So just put a pin in that thought for the moment and know that is coming down the road. Mary, we talked to a lot of female techie entrepreneurial types, okay, many of whom are not at all intimidated by technology, but some of whom are more intimidated by the world of like content and marketing and some of that, what I want to say, business woo, I guess, that goes on in those areas. It's like, how did you magically find all these clients?
Yeah.
From somebody who feels fairly confident about their tech, but not so confident about that other side of the business equation. What is your advice for someone who's in that space?
I always think everything is so transferable, and tech is, I believe, harder because there are actual skills and things you need to know that go along with tech. Marketing can seem intimidating, but it's really business is people. At the end of the day, business is people, and marketing is about reaching people. So if you can talk with people, you can do marketing.
There's a reason I went into
If the automatic answer is ew, people, then maybe we need to work on that. That's a different thing. But I do really believe if you are able to have a conversation just like you and I are having right now, marketing is very achievable. Just like with tech, when those of us who are confident with tech see other people get hung up on the nuts and the bolts of the integration or the password or the codes and the everything and we know that, oh, you just need to go in there and just add the thing, hit save, like you're good to go. And the same thing is true in marketing, where I think people get hung up on the strategy or all the different platforms. And one thing seems intimidating, but another thing seems doable. And it's really just a matter of just getting started and thinking about it in terms of how would I want people to receive me if I was in front of them, just talking to them. And so if you're doing a marketing strategy that honestly doesn't look or feel like you, then it's not going to hit right. Just if you walked into a networking room and you were like, acting like a stand-up comedian and you don't normally do
Yeah.
that.
And you
And
wore
you don't want
something
to
you
do that.
totally normally wouldn't wear.
Yeah, it's really very much like that. I believe marketing should feel good, just like technology should feel good. And if something doesn't feel right, this is where the woo starts to come in. If your intuition is giving you alarm bells, something really is off. And it's okay, then what is it? If I don't feel comfortable on a certain social media platform, maybe that platform is honestly not for me. I'm not going to be able to talk effectively with somebody else. It's the equivalent of me walking into a networking chamber event wearing 4-inch high heels when I don't normally wear 4-inch high heels. And now my feet are killing me and I can't
And your
balance and I can't
back is
walk. And
wrong. And yeah.
you really need to pay attention to that. And I think sometimes we think there has to be some defined logical reason why we're not going to use XYZ. And I always say, no, there doesn't have to be a defined logical reason. If
Yeah.
the vibe is not vibing, like there's a
The
reason
vibe is not vibing, move on. It's like me and Twitter. I'm Twitter allergic. I'm a long form girl. Do not put
uh-huh.
180 character limit or whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
on me. It's not going to
Mm-hmm.
work.
And who knows why we feel that way, but the same thing's true in tech. There are so many different tools you can use. I think one of my most favorite stories is from somebody I had in my mastermind back in the day when I still ran a mastermind. And because the online entrepreneurs around her used Apple products, she had this very fancy MacBook Pro and all these Apple products. And she was not, the vibe was not vibing with the Apple
She
products.
was not a Mac person.
She wasn't a Mac person. She loved Microsoft products. And the big coaching moment was, who said you had to use Apple products? There are a lot of people who use a PC. And so she changed and was instantly more productive and so much happier.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you don't have to explain why you don't like Apple products. You just know that for whatever reason, the OS on the Microsoft operating system, it just works better for you. You just compute it better, faster, easier. Go with it. Go with the path of least resistance. And the same is true for marketing too.
I love that. I love that. So tell me a little bit about your path through technology and ultimately into the world of marketing.
So I am a librarian by trade, and in my information science graduate school days, I specialized in human computer interaction. So it was the early days of UX design and usability studies, and I fell in love with it. I went into the digital preservation world in archiving, and I worked in entertainment for about a decade and helped build software. I was a part of software teams and I was always housed in the tech department. They never really knew quite where to put me. I did a lot of digital asset management, a lot of database design, a lot of management in that way. And I saw instantly how so much of this was about people, like tech is about people. And so most organizations to this day, I don't think have a really great bridge spot for somebody like that. They either put them in tech or they put them in marketing and they're not really sure where that seat should belong. But I found like people started calling me the translator and the bridge. I started getting invited to meetings. I had no part in the project, but they're like, you're so good at translating. Can you please help us?
We just need you to interpret one side for the other.
The engineering teams loved me because they knew that I could put the human part for the humans that they were really struggling with. And the marketers really loved having me because I could translate the techie thing and they would go, oh, I get now like why that recommendation is what it is. Executives would have me come join their meetings because they were like, I need this shortened. Like, I'm too busy. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know how to compute this. And then that eventually grew into consulting. And while I was consulting, I had quite a few small business owners come to me, mostly women, because they knew I had the tech background. And they were actually coming to me through my tarot reading arm because I was reading tarot on nights and weekends. And they'd be like, "Can I ask a question about my business?" I'd be like, "Yeah, great. Let's ask it. Let's do
Let's
business
do
questions."
business.
And they're like, "So if I wanted to integrate this software with that software, like it's just not working the way I expected." And I'm like, "This is not for a tarot reading." And then
Let's discuss Zapier.
yeah, exactly. I'd be like, "Have you done a full workflow and assessed like all of your tools and really
And
done a
what
full
you're using to
assessment?"
do what. Yeah.
Mhm. And then that showed me pretty quickly that they needed a hybrid space. Like they were coming to me because they were very intuitively and spiritually minded, but they didn't have a place to ask the intuitive questions in their business spaces. Most of the business spaces, they didn't feel comfortable enough asking a tech question. They wanted to come to a woman who could talk to them, even though I was giving them pretty much the same info as all of my guy friends were, but they just felt more comfortable asking
Yeah.
me. And then eventually that grew into a mastermind where we did systems and operations for business, and
Yeah.
spent a whole year cleaning it up for solopreneurs and small teams. And I retired that like a couple years ago because that space just started to morph and change. And people were coming in every year increasingly asking about help with content production.
Yes, which is a huge
Mm.
part of marketing out there in the internet nowadays. It's
Yeah.
like there's been this ground level shift around things like Google Ads. It's become much harder to monetize your Google Ads
Yeah.
and your Facebook ads. And yeah, a different approach needs to be taken. And content marketing is one of those approaches.
Yeah. And I've been
And
creating
special.
it's very special. I've been in the content space since 2010. I had a side hustle blog when I was in my corporate career, and I learned it, I call it the old fashioned way before all the fancy everything was on.
Yeah.
And just pounding out words at a keyboard every night and posting it to a blog. And in the strategies that we use now are honestly different. There's a ton more social media out there than there used to be. The way people get their eyes on your material is very different now. But the act of actually systematizing your production and producing content so that it's regularly published and put out into the world honestly hasn't changed very
Yeah.
much.
And I think that's one of the key things that you need to get in place when you go, okay, I'm going to start marketing my thing out into the world, whether it's a software as a service or
Yeah.
coaching or whatever your deal is, because we
Yeah.
all have a lot of different jams out there. But if you don't have that system, I think that's where a lot of things break down and fall apart,
It
frankly.
really does. Yeah. I'm always looking for, again, the path of least resistance. And like, where can we replicate this? And then from there, can anything be automated? And then from there, how do you delegate out the rest? And what cannot be delegated? So, like, you can't delegate yourself right now as the host. To have somebody else sit in your seat and talk to me right now would be weird and not
Yeah.
right.
And not that you can do that for maybe an episode or something if you
Yeah.
really had to be someplace else. But yeah, it's not something you want to do long term. And you've seen that with Johnny Carson, for example.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Late night is a great example. At some point, somebody gets sick or they have to go on vacation or whatever, and they get these celebrities to come in and sit in the hosting seat, and that's a lot of fun. But when it comes to our businesses, like we usually are the brand, and
Yeah.
so it's a little different. Um, and I'm always paying attention to the emotions too. Like we say around my business, you are your best system, you are your first system. And so as a system, you have to ask yourself, am I happy doing what I'm doing? This
Am I healthy doing what I'm doing?
also such a good word to use. Am I healthy? Am I happy? Is this really working? Is this right? Because sometimes we think we should on ourselves. Like, I have to do this, I have to do that.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
What are
yeah,
the unwritten rules that you're following right now that are making you freaking miserable?
yes. And we attach those a lot to marketing strategy because it's you see someone else doing well and you say, oh, then I must have to do
Yeah, I
whatever
must
they're
have to
doing.
go over onto Pinterest and post multiple times a day so that the algorithm sees that I'm a serious person. And for
Mhm.
some people, they take to that like a fish to water, and other people, it's
Oh,
no, you're killing me right now. I'd rather
yeah.
poke my eye out with a pencil.
And you also have to be able to reverse engineer what you could possibly see in someone's business, which isn't always very apparent.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people I have worked behind the scenes in their businesses where they make it seem like it's them. They're the ones writing all the emails. They're the ones posting and answering all your messages. And it's not, it's an entire team of people behind the scenes. And sometimes it's difficult to see all of that. I know after producing enough and helping people behind the scenes in their businesses that for certain volume and quantity and quality level that people might be putting out, that they clearly cannot do that on their own. But if you're not very skilled, even if you've been in business a long time, but if you really don't know the world of content creation and production, it can seem, wow, she's just a superwoman. How does she get all that done? And then you start shooting on yourself. I should be doing better.
Yeah.
I should be
What's
putting out
wrong
more.
with me that I'm
But yeah,
not every
mhm,
morning putting out my 5 minute morning pick me up video?
yeah,
And I, having produced a couple of shows now myself, I will be vulnerable and I will share that the first show that I ever did, it took us 4 weeks of planning for the show, and then to actually prepare and set up to do the first show, I dedicated 2 full days to that process.
Yeah.
Now you start to get in a rhythm, you start to develop a system, and eventually that gets faster. And by year 4 of doing that show, I could walk into my office, flip 2 switches. I would have all of my stuff up where it needs to be. I could sit down, I could start that show on 10 minutes notice. But that's after I'd spent 4 years hammering out a system that supported and allowed me to do that, because the work is now happening on a routine basis. Much of
Yeah.
it's been automated and gathered together. And the work that I put in there at the front end is what
Yeah.
allows me now to say, 10 minutes and I'm good to
Yeah.
go.
Yes. I love that you told that story because I think what we so rarely see from people, they're not very transparent about it. I don't know that people know how to be transparent about it either, is the path towards that very quick startup, the automatic process. And there are a lot of learning lessons along the way, and they're not always dramatic, but it's like you sit down to record with a guest one day and realize, oh, you know what? Next time I really need to do whatever before I sit down with them. And then you do it the next time and
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
incrementally make it better. So I'm a really big proponent of just start publishing because as technologists, we love our data. and,
And we
and,
love
and if
our automation.
we do, and we love to be able to do something with that data or that knowledge to make the automation. And in order to get that information, you have to have something to work with.
Yeah, you
So,
have to have done it a few times to
mhm,
know what's important, what's not important, what gets in the way.
yeah.
And speaking of getting in the way, we have a commercial break coming up. And so, everyone who's joined us today for this conversation, I'd like to invite you during this break, a little reminder to go out and take the Leadership Pitfall Quiz at leadershippitfallquiz.com and hang with us. We'll be right back from the break where we will finish up our little conversation here about show automation and talk a little bit about Mary's leadership pitfall results. So, hang with us. We'll be right back. Oh, check it out, the world here. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear. Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales. I'm still here with Mary Williams, and we are discussing automation in your marketing. And before we went to break, you were saying sometimes hang the automation, just go out and do it, just go out and get started. So you've got the right data to work with as you're moving forward and looking to automate a process. For you, when you're getting started with a client, how does that kind of look when you're pushing them out of the nest that way?
Usually, most of the people I work with have had like starts and stops and starts and stops. So there's not a whole lot to work with.
Yeah.
And what I love doing is spending time in the pre production phase and making sure that we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's and thinking about not just the act of getting on the microphone, which is the sexy part, but
Yes. And the fun
the
part, as far as
really
I'm
fun part,
concerned.
but also really thinking about what's my structure. I know what I want now, but what's the bigger vision and like how flexible am I around that? What is going to be my production process? Where am I storing my files? How am I handing them off to people so that we don't end up with expensive problems that have to be fixed later that could be prevented from the beginning? So while we're doing all of that, usually they don't have a whole lot to work with. And they also usually don't really have a lot of people paying attention to them yet. And
Yeah.
the ego does not love that. The ego
No,
does not love
and it's not a
that.
fun experience. That a lot of times you get this impression from podcasters out there, build it and they will come in
Yes.
droves. And the
And
truth of
that's
the
not true.
matter is, about 3% of the podcasts out there get 95% of the listenership. And so the other 98% are scrambling for these little crumbs. And I know when I put out my radio show, and it was actually through a talk radio network, so there's like built-in audience, and my first show was like
Yeah.
40 listeners,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh wow, okay, it's probably going to take a minute then, huh?
It takes a little bit of a minute, but also it's a really great place to be because it's the time for you to if it's a podcast, get on the mic, start using your voice, get all of the little itchy moments out of you,
Out of the
and
way. Yeah. The
out of the
awkwardness
way.
around going to
Uh-huh.
commercial. Yeah.
Have fun, and start the process of gaining the reps, gaining the hours, the minutes, the time that it takes. It's just pure time on a recorded mic that is not the same when you are not in front of a mic and not recording, and to do it, and so that you can then get those personal notes. And as you're doing that, you've got your 40 odd listeners who are honestly like your super fans or your OGs, and they love watching you grow. And then as you grow, you'll get more people. And by that point, you'll feel more confident. You'll have a much better idea of the direction that you're going in. Though, if they're working with me, then they have a chance to refine and improve their process without the pressure of, oh my gosh, I've got a million listeners.
Hearing
Oh
me flub
crap.
this up.
Oh crap. Or also the systems are still a mess behind the scenes, and the episode has to drop in the next 12 hours and I have 24 hours of work to do. What am I going to do?
Exactly.
And so you get a lot of breathing room and a wiggle room in those early days, and I think they're really magical, honestly. And but the ego does not love it, especially
No, no, those first few sets of numbers were really demoralizing.
yeah,
It's like,
they're
why am I
more.
doing this?
But I feel like they also offer a really great invitation to any person, which is when it's like like we were talking about where we each of us live, and
Yeah.
there's good weather where you live and there's bad weather where you live. And I have lived in like all four corners of the United States. And the advice I had always been given back in the day was, if you think you want to move to a place, go there at the worst time of the year. And if you still love it, you're going to love living there.
Then you'll be fine. Yeah, exactly.
And in business, I think it's the same thing. So if you're producing content, let's use the podcast thing as an example again, since we're on a podcast right now, and you're recording and it's gray weather, it's winter weather, that's not your favorite weather, and you're still loving the act of podcasting, you're gonna love podcasting. But if
Yes,
you
because as you get traction and you get your stuff
it's
figured
just gonna
out,
get
you're
better.
just going to blossom.
It's just
Exactly.
going to get better. But if it's 40 listeners and that's the equivalent of the gray winter rainy day, and you're like, I hate this, I
It's
got
a
news for you.
slog. It's like pulling my fingernails out. Yeah, no.
And then that's where I see people, this is where the coaching moment comes in. I see them fall down slippery slopes in the past where they have paid thousands of dollars for help, thinking that if they paid someone to help them, it would pull them out of the winter weather that they hate. When it
Yeah.
turns out that their jam is really just doing live streams on, say, Facebook or something.
Yeah,
And
exactly. As opposed to all the complicated production that goes with a podcast, for example,
mhm.
or a video blog.
Yeah. And of course, we're also thinking about our business strategy and what's the purpose of the content that we're creating.
And
Or
I
yeah,
love that you bring that around because the whole point is not to become famous, to become internet famous. The whole point is to sell some stuff.
exactly. Exactly. But those moments do invite in a great dialogue, whether it's just with yourself or with your coach or advisors or whomever, to ask yourself, why do I want that thing so bad? If it's really hard for me to produce content on a certain medium or a certain platform, and I just keep saying, I've just got to do it, like the ego is in the driver's seat
Yeah.
saying, I just got to get it.
This
And it's
this is the way it succeeds. Yeah.
Mhm. And you have to ask yourself, why do I believe that is true? And I do feel like notoriety is a really big thing a lot of people want. But sometimes I think we get it confused with business success, because there are a lot of very successful business people that we don't see online.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to see that. But when you see the influencers with the really large audiences and they're all glammed up and they look so great and they're on the stage and all the things, like I always tell people, if that's what you want, there's definitely a path to that,
Yeah.
and there are very like measurable marketable steps to get there. But if doing those steps is the equivalent of the gray winter rainy weather and you don't like it, then you could get internet famous, but you'll hate it even more because it's not what you
It's
actually.
more of the rainy weather.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So going back to this, because this is like examining the unspoken expectations that you're trying to live up to here. the unwritten rules that you're attempting to live by. Let's bust some of this open. What should we consider when we're thinking about designing a content marketing strategy for our business when it comes to us as a person trying to drive this thing?
I always like to tell people to think of it like a Venn diagram. So one circle is you, and the other circle is your ideal audience. And there are going to be things that you love that they don't love. And there's going to be things that they love that you don't love. But somewhere those circles overlap, and that space in the middle is what you love and they love. And that's when you meet them where they're at. So sometimes I see people try to go outside of that shared space all the way over into the opposite circle. Well, I'm meeting them where they're at because they really love this thing, but I don't know that I love
But
it. And
you
it's
hate
like,
it. Yeah.
and so now we're back to that same equation. And so if you can think about it in terms of I'm meeting my people where they're at, and also they are also meeting me where I'm at, you're going to have better conversions. You're going to get better engagement. It's going to make it easier for the tech to shine and do its job while you're putting out the marketing material. And it honestly, it might not be very many things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We're in business. We're trying to sell our offers. We're trying to make some money, unless the goal is I'm going to become a celebrity
I'm going
online.
to be internet famous. Yes.
That's a different goal. And so learning to separate those things and determine what is my business model. And if the business model is honestly like I have a business and I sell courses, or I sell coaching packages, or I sell a product or whatever, then that center of the Venn diagram is going to serve you really well. And if you're like listening to this and you're like, I don't even know what that is, and it's then that's the first thing that you want to investigate. And that's where the data is so important, but you don't always know until you try things. So sometimes you might try, say, being on Instagram for a while and discover, no, I don't like
I'm
it.
not an Insta person. Yes.
But you wouldn't know it if you didn't try it.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
maybe you go try LinkedIn, or maybe you go try YouTube or some other thing. Let's talk a minute about content, because that's a real big generic term. What are some of the things that fit under that umbrella of content?
You're going to love this answer. I personally feel like everything is content. I feel like
Which is
everything,
good news, bad news, right? It
it
doesn't
is.
narrow it down for you, but there's a lot of stuff you can throw away too.
Yeah, there's a lot of good news, bad news with that, because now you could be like squirrel, or you could realize that, wow, I have a treasure trove from which I can choose. And I personally always love having more options. So having lots of options is a great thing to know. What we're doing right now is definitely content. But what I find with a lot of people, they don't realize that content's happening all day, every day. And a lot of times the behind the scenes things that you do that are just automatic for you are actually gold for your audience. How
Yeah,
it
they're
actually.
intriguing, fascinating, and a wonderful peek behind the curtain.
Yeah. And we live in a day and an age where our content helps our audiences or our potential customers connect with us and build know and trust factor. So, pre social media days, we did a lot more in person networking, and there you would have coffee chat meetings, and we still do those things. But now we have proof of life online, and people can go check each other out afterward or stay in touch in between. And I think it's really important to recognize that content gets created all the time. So I'm actually a really big fan inside of social platforms of doing the proof of life and posting, but having the meaningful connections, the direct message, the DM threads is
Yeah.
gold. And while you're chatting with somebody and they're just making a connection, the conversation can naturally pull out pain points or some words of wisdom you give them, and it's that can be turned into a quotable later or
Yeah.
something. And so content is always happening, and I think sometimes
I,
people think they have to sit down for a brainstorming
I
session, and it,
really want to talk about direct messages
yeah, let's do it, let's do
and
it.
marketing, because there are people out there teaching some strategies that are just like, you've got to be kidding me. It's like you've walked into a bar and you walk up to somebody and go, "Hey, nice tits. Let's." I was like, no, you're not getting laid tonight. You're not getting married tonight. That's not what this approach is about.
The door is closed.
So, how does direct messaging fit into your concept of concept marketing?
I feel like the content you put out should eventually lead to one of two paths. If it was a flow model, it would be like branch A is it's super clear and I want it and I'm buying it. Click buy. And then branch B is I'm interested, but I've got questions, and it
Yeah.
goes into a question section. And that could have multiple branches. There could be discovery calls they book on your calendar. They could email you, or if they're on social, they could send you a direct message. And for this instance, we could use LinkedIn as a great example. I actually use LinkedIn far more for direct messaging than I do for posting. I see people go crazy with posting on LinkedIn. And I'm like, the best, but the business is people, and the conversation is happening, the vulnerable conversation is happening behind closed doors, because people don't want to
Exactly.
do that
They're
in
not
public.
going to do that in the comments.
They don't
No.
want to do that in a public comment. And even though many people are very unfiltered in our post-COVID world, they still don't want to do that in a public place. So that's where your direct messages are really valuable. And there are some people who will try to use the direct message space as a way to get them the link to book on their Calendly or their Acuity's calendar to book a call. And that's one way you could do it. Some people just straight up have a conversation in there, or set up time to meet in person if you're local. And so it's just a way to literally interact directly with somebody in a place where they don't feel like they're being watched by everybody, and they're entitled not to be watched by everybody while they're making a decision if they're going to buy your coaching package or your service. And so it's really a necessary thing. What you don't want to do is just start going into people's DM threads and just being like,
Yeah,
you know,
just spamming them.
be like, do you
Hey,
want to
I'm
buy?
this amazing. I've got this amazing software thing. It will change your life. And I think
Yeah.
maybe your business, it might apply to you. It's, yeah, no, that's not how you start your conversation.
Just this morning, I cleared 3 emails out of my inbox, and it was cold emails. They are able to scrape your info off of everywhere. And they're like, do you need a YouTube strategy?
I am a YouTube strategy.
I'm like, delete. And so that would be the equivalent of doing that in like a LinkedIn direct message or an Instagram direct message or in Facebook Messenger. And so you don't want to do that. Right now, a lot of people are using ManyChat, which is very popular. And it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. But usually, when it's been implemented,
I was going to say it works better after you have some data.
yeah, it works better if
After you know what that conversation flow looks like.
yes. And so there might be a little bit of messy few first rounds of it, and to know that is okay. And if you are genuinely offending your audience and you can tell, put on your human hat and realize maybe I need to back off and take my foot off the gas pedal here for a
Yeah,
minute. Like,
maybe
what's
we'll
going
put ManyChat on pause and we'll have some normal human to human conversation for a
on?
while. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've seen people, especially with very large audiences, use it very effectively, where they are posting quite a lot of educational material or informative material, and they'll say, drop this emoji or this word in the chat or in the
Yeah.
comments,
And
and
it
then it
triggers the bot to
automatically.
provide. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
And so, in that sense, like that automation can work. But when you have a smaller audience and you have a smaller business, it's just frankly more targeted, which honestly is most of us.
And that's
Um,
actually better, I think, right now, because one of your biggest selling points is that authentic personal touch right now, because everybody's going to the robots. And so this makes you stand out.
It does, and it brings us back to that winter weather, rainy day metaphor that we've been using. And if you discover that you hate having conversations with people about your offer, I got news for you. You've really got to ask yourself what you're doing. How's that business going these days?
Exactly. And maybe do you need a partner who's more comfortable having conversations like this? You
Yeah, it's
know,
even
because a
really
lot of times, as I know, a female entrepreneur, I tend to think I have to wear all the hats to really be legit. But the truth of the matter is, powerhouse partners can be amazing things.
so amazing. At the beginning, you do need to sell your own offers. You need to know directly
Yeah, exactly.
and what's not, because if you hire an amazing salesperson, and there are amazing salespeople out there,
Yeah,
but if
yeah.
you hire them and they build your sales process for you and they have all those conversations for you, And then one day they're like, I won the lotto and I'm moving
And I'm
on.
out of here. And now
And all
you
of a
are
sudden your
stuck with
sales
something you
pipeline
can't run.
crumbles. Yeah, have what I call a preventable emergency on your hand and can be prevented
Yeah.
by making sure that you've established enough of yourself in that process before you delegate it out or automate it out. And yeah, I really feel like in the age of AI, the big thing that's going to set entrepreneurs apart is when you need the human touch, are you being as human as you can be? And
Yeah.
is that warmth there? Because AI is amazing and it can help us do so many things. It can bring down the cost of your overhead. So you can use humans for really powerful things like interacting with other people.
Yeah,
Human
exactly. Well,
level.
we
Yeah.
have blown past our second commercial break already. So I'm going to put a pin in this. It's been amazing conversation. I'm sure we could have an entire interview just on this topic. But I did want to open that topic because it's so important. And a lot of times when you feel, what do I want to say, sales awkward, it's easy to embrace these kind of impersonal, just chunk out a bunch of stuff that you don't have to really be engaged with,
Yeah.
as opposed to leaning into, okay, I'm uncomfortable with this, probably more because it's new, or perhaps I have something personally going on for myself around the selling process that I need to deal with in order to become comfortable with it.
It's very true.
So we are at our second break. And if you've not had a chance to go out to take the Leadership Pitfall Quiz, it's at leadershippitfallquiz.com. Here's your last chance to do this before we discuss Mary's results. And hang with us. We'll be right back from the break.
Oh, checked it loud, but we'll hear. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales, and I am here with Mary Williams. And as promised, prior to the last two breaks, we are going to discuss her results from the Leadership Pitfall Quiz. So, Mary, share with us, drum roll, please. What was your leadership animal?
I am a golden retriever.
Yay! Everybody loves a golden retriever. They're so happy and friendly.
They are.
They are. They are. And that's the beautiful thing about being a golden. You walk into the room, everybody is so happy to see you because you're always this wonderful, warm, fuzzy experience, right? But the downside, the dark side that I've noticed with golden retrievers is sometimes the hesitancy to set boundaries, to say no to other people, to in any way disappoint the other person. And if you're in business anytime at all, you'll know that not everybody can always be happy at the same time.
No, that has been a very big learning lesson in in my personal and professional life. And learning boundaries, I think, is one of the most powerful things you can do as a business owner, especially if you're a golden retriever type, probably. Yeah. I like to, I always tell people in my intuitive practice that we live in a both and world. And if you like seeing that result in the quiz, I was like, oh, that makes total sense because it's been this journey of both and. I can still be warm and fuzzy and golden retrievery. And at the same time, they might not be happy about the answer that I just given them. And that's
Because
okay.
I can be a firm golden retriever who holds the line.
No, I won't fetch that right now. I'm sorry. I don't fetch those objects. Yeah.
Exactly. Your emergency is not my emergency.
Yes. I remember as a kid growing up, there was a metaphysical store in my small town in Michigan, and they had these bumper stickers. And one of them said, lack of planning on your part constitutes no emergency on mine. And I always hung on to that.
Yeah.
It took me many years to learn how to operate in that way and not just love the slogan.
Yeah, exactly. I love the slogan, but real hard to apply in practice sometimes. Indeed. So, what were some of your early attempts when you were starting to set those kind of boundaries? Tell us about an early success. Tell us about an early failure in learning to set those.
Yeah, I would say in my corporate career, I learned a lot of failures, and some of that trained behavior carried over into jumping off into consulting and entrepreneurship. And it was just that automatic yes, I want to do a good job for you. And so can we add in this other extra thing? But if it was in corporate, it would have been the scope of the project has been set, but it's can we also do this thing? Okay.
Let's scope creep.
Scope creep. It's totally scope creep. And I remember that happening a lot. And then as a consultant, learning like scope creep still happens.
Oh, amen does it.
And then even in my coaching practice, having set a clear program where there's a syllabus and everything, and then everyone piles into a Zoom room and they're like, but also can we? And
It
it's like
would be great if we. Yep.
Yeah. And I think by the time I was running my mastermind program, I was really starting to learn to actively set firmer boundaries where it's no, we're not doing that in this program. Or I love that idea. I'm going to think about how I can incorporate it. Maybe it'll be like an extra one-off workshop. Maybe it
Exactly.
will
Maybe
be
it'll be its own program farther down the road, but it's not
Mhm.
here right now in this one. Yeah.
Yeah. And doing things like incorporating readings into the program was actually something that came out of that, which was really originally was not part of the program, but people started booking readings off on the side. And then they were requesting, can you just pull an oracle card before we start? And they wanted more woo, they wanted more woo.
More woo with their
And
business. Yes.
and what ended up happening is, okay, that has to be parked basically for the majority of an entire program year. But when the next launch came around and the doors open, it's okay, here's what's going to happen this year. I'm going to outline it. And the price is going up because also each month you're getting one-on-one reading with me each month. So you can have that reading experience because you keep
You're
asking
getting
for
that
it.
extra time. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So learning how to find a healthy way to park that summer. Cause I think sometimes too, those scope creep things, the things that start to erode your boundaries, like they're not always bad. In fact, I don't think frequently they are bad. I think
Yeah,
people are telling you what they want
exactly.
and finding a way to add that in a way where you're not taxing yourself and overdoing it is
Yeah, for
a
what
learn.
you're getting in exchange. It needs to be a balanced exchange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Give me just a second. Got to get the frog out of my throat. I actually had a remarkable example of scope creep when I was in corporate. And it started when my boss came to me and said, there's this project that's happening in this city down the road from us. And I know you don't want to be involved, but you could do this one little thing for me here, which is make sure that everybody's got the right training that they need before they go there.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And this was before I learned to say, and if I take this on, how am I getting rid of something equivalent? Because that was my moment to negotiate that. And I have to admit that I failed on that one. And so it started with make sure everybody got the training. And then it turned out that the people who were slated to go had not actually received offers to go. And so that ended up on my plate. And then some of the managers who were supposed to go weren't able to be released from their current obligations. And pretty soon, guess who is down the road in this other city she did not plan to go to? But it did come with a nice increase and a title increase. But still, yeah, there are a few things I learned from that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking back during COVID, I was running communities for this very large coaching operation and there was totally there was scope creep every day. and, and one of those things was they moved their sales conferences obviously into the online space and there was a need for having a moderator, an MC, and lo and behold, I fell into the role and
Yeah, imagine who they would choose for that.
total scope creep. And I was very popular amongst their coaching community. People love coming to my office hours and all the things. And they put me on the microphone. And pretty soon I was on the microphone a lot. And it was too much. But because of that experience, though, I discovered, wow, I really love hosting. I really love emceeing. And now people pay me to host an MC on their stages. I help people run their sales webinars. And I don't know that I would have known that I had the talent or the desire to do that if that hadn't happened. So not to Pollyanna it, but I do think there's a reason for it, and it can
Yeah.
give you data, and it was good data. I could have probably cut the data set sooner.
Yeah, exactly. I could have negotiated around the data set so I wasn't committed to as many other things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But it was very valuable data that's turned into something that honestly is quite lucrative now and has served like the next evolution of my business and career. So yeah, I think like you can sometimes look back at things like scope creep as a golden retriever, if anyone else has that, and maybe do a little assessment like what data can I pull out of this? Yes, I was burned out, overloaded, all the things. My boundaries were crap. But what did I learn from it?
Yeah.
Maybe there is some gold in there that would bring me happiness that I maybe associate with an unhappy bad boundaried time. But if I can dig into that a little bit, it might give me some data.
Yeah. And I find in my own life experience that some of the crappiest times actually brought forward some of the most valuable, what I want to say, data, information, insight into who I am, what I'm about, and where I'm going that I
Agreed.
probably would not have been able to find as quickly and distinctly and succinctly if I had not gone through the crappy moment.
I totally agree. That's such a good statement.
Yeah. If you have crappy times in your past that you've been avoiding, and I really don't want to go back and think about those because, yeah, a lot of times there'll be a rush of old emotion or whatever that comes with that. If you can ride through that emotion, it gives you a really good space to look at patterns of your own and
Yeah.
to see where they're serving you, where they're not serving you, and perhaps where you can leverage a small change to make things better for yourself moving forward.
Yeah.
Love that. So we are at the end of our show already. Oh my gosh. So the plan was to give you time to talk about your gift and all this kind of stuff. So I'm just going to refer everybody down to the show notes. She's got some amazing gifts that she's brought with her. So check out the show notes and take advantage of those, especially if you're thinking about any form of content marketing to promote your thing, because not all content marketing is created equal, and you want the content marketing that lights you up, that you find easy to do, that will move your business forward. And so I highly recommend having a conversation with Mary. And until next week, I would encourage you to go out, be wild, be wonderful, and know that next week we are going to talk about startups and landing money partners for your venture as a woman in a man's world. So make sure you come back next week after you've gone out and been bold and brilliant.